It was an unusually rainy afternoon when Jamal, Malik, and Aisha were walking home from school. The sky was a heavy gray, and the rain had been falling nonstop since the early hours of the day. The small neighborhood they lived in was used to the rain, but today it had flooded the streets. The roads were muddy, and the puddles were deep enough to make walking a challenge. But the kids had learned to navigate the weather over the years. They had no choice. They had to walk home. Jamal, the oldest of the three, always tried to keep the mood light. He would crack jokes to keep everyone from complaining too much about the weather. Malik, who was always quick with a laugh, joined in, and even Aisha, who was usually more serious, couldn't help but smile at their antics. But there was a certain heaviness in the air today. Their neighborhood wasn't the richest, and the Yaowayan constant downpour seemed to highlight the things they didn't have. Their shoes were soaked, and their backpacks were heavy with water. They were passing a stretch of road that was particularly bad, with deep puddles that stretched across the entire width of the street. Jamal pointed out a large puddle ahead, and they all tried to avoid stepping into it, but it was impossible. The water covered the sidewalk, and there was no way around it. As they trudged through the cold, thick mud, Aisha glanced up and saw something strange in the distance. A dark shape, a vehicle stuck in the mud. The vehicle looked completely out of place here. It was shiny, silver, and sleek, like something straight out of a luxury car commercial. It was a large SUV, and it had sunk deep into the mud. The tires were spinning, and the driver was clearly frustrated. The man behind the wheel seemed like he had been trying to move for a while but was making no progress. "Looks like someone's in trouble," Malik said, pointing toward the SUV. He wasn't usually the one to offer help, but something about this situation made him stop. Jamal squinted at the car and then glanced at the others. "Well, we're not going to just walk by, are we?" He wasn't asking, more like making a statement. He always had a sense of responsibility, even if it wasn't the easiest thing to carry. Aisha hesitated. She wasn't sure what the right thing to do was. The man in the car was obviously rich, and they didn't have much in common with him. He wasn't from their neighborhood, that was clear. But Jamal was already walking toward the car, his determination clear in his steps. Malik followed without hesitation, and Aisha, after a brief moment of doubt, decided to join them. As they approached the car, the driver lowered the window. He looked worn out, his face lined with frustration. He didn't seem angry, just defeated. His clothes were expensive, and he wore a pair of sunglasses even though it was cloudy. The kids couldn't help but notice the contrast between his perfect, well-kept appearance and the mess they were all in. "Stuck in the mud, huh?" Jamal said, his voice friendly but with a hint of humor. "You trying to race the rain or something?" The man looked at them, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he sighed, glancing out at the flooded road. "I guess I underestimated how bad this road could get," he said, clearly frustrated. "I've been trying to get out for the past half hour, but no luck." Malik looked at the car, then at the mud, and shrugged. "Looks like it's going to take more than just pushing the gas pedal." Aisha stepped closer to the car. "We can help," she said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. It wasn't like them to offer help to strangers, especially ones who looked like they had it all. But there was something about the man's helplessness that made her want to do something. The man raised an eyebrow. "You think you can help me get out of here?" His tone wasn't mocking, but it wasn't full of hope either. It was almost as if he couldn't believe 3 kids would be able to do anything. Jamal nodded confidently. "We can try. We'll need to push and someone should steer, but we've got this." For a moment the man seemed uncertain, but then he shrugged. "I guess I don't have much choice," he said, clearly not wanting to sit there any longer. "All right, let's give it a shot." The kids wasted no time. Jamal took the lead, positioning himself at the back of the car. Malik, ever ready for action, moved to the front, getting ready to push, while Aisha stood beside the man, preparing to steer the wheel when the time came. With a little push from each of them, the car began to budge. It was slow at first, the tires slipping and sliding in the thick mud, but the kids kept at it. Jamal gritted his teeth, pushing with all his strength, and Malik was right there with him. Aisha kept the man's eyes on the wheel, telling him when to shift gears or turn slightly. "All right, we've got it," Jamal shouted as the car finally moved forward inch by inch. The man's face lit up as he saw the SUV finally begin to emerge from the deep puddle. It was slow, but with every push they were getting closer to freedom. Finally, with one last collective effort, the SUV broke free, and the tires hit dry ground. It wasn't pretty, and they were all covered in mud, but the car was free. "Thew," man looked at them, eyes wide with disbelief. "Well, I'll be damned, you actually did it." He seemed genuinely impressed, his usual confident demeanor softening. Jamal smiled, wiping mud off his hands. "Told you we could do it." The man shook his head in amazement. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "I've never had anyone help me like this before." Aisha smiled slightly, glancing at her friends. "You don't have to thank us. We're just doing what anyone would do." The man looked at them for a long moment as though trying to figure them out. Then he reached into the glove compartment and pulled out his business card. "You kids are something else. My name's Richard Westbrook. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." Jamal took the card, still surprised by the gesture. "Thanks," he said, not really knowing what else to say. Richard nodded and got back into his SUV. "I'll never forget this," he said before rolling the window up and driving off. The sound of the engine fading into the distance echoed in the quiet street, leaving the kids standing there wet and tired, but proud of what they had just done. As they stood there, watching the dust settle where Richard had driven away, they couldn't help but wonder if this was just another random encounter, or if something more was about to unfold. But for now, they turned and continued their walk home, the rain still pouring down, but their spirits lifted by the unexpected turn of events. This expansion keeps the story engaging and focuses on the kids' teamwork and their unexpected encounter with the billionaire. Would you like to continue with the next part or make any changes to this? The days following their encounter with Richard Westbrook were filled with both excitement and uncertainty. As Jamal, Malik, and Aisha walked home each day, their minds kept drifting back to the man they had helped. They couldn't stop thinking about how, for just a brief moment, they had been a part of something so different from their everyday lives. The reality of their situation quickly returned, though, and they found themselves struggling with the same challenges they faced before, the SUV incident. Jamal, for one, had always dreamed of becoming a basketball player. He was tall, fast, and had a natural gift for the game. But dreams didn't come easy, especially when you came from a neighborhood where the opportunities were limited. His basketball dreams seemed far out of reach. The only court near them was cracked and filled with uneven patches, and there were never enough basketballs to go around. Jamal knew that in order to get better, he needed training and support, things that he couldn't afford. Every time he saw a group of kids from wealthier neighborhoods playing at pristine courts, he felt a sense of frustration. But he kept pushing himself. He practiced on his own every day, determined to make it, despite the lack of resources. Malik, on the other hand, didn't know exactly what he wanted to do with his life, but he knew that something had to change. He was a natural charmer and could make anyone laugh. But beneath the humor, there was a deep sense of uncertainty. Malik had always been the life of the party, always cracking jokes and making people smile. But his grades were slipping and his future seemed unclear. He had big dreams. He loved technology and thought coding was cool. But he had no idea how to make that dream a reality. His school didn't offer much in terms of opportunities in the tech field, and his family didn't have the money to send him to special programs. He often joked with Jamal and Aisha about how cool it would be to work in a big tech company one day, but deep down, Malik wasn't sure how he would ever get there. Aisha was the most serious of the trio. She was passionate about school and dreamed of going to college, but the idea of affording it seemed impossible. The family's financial struggles weighed heavily on her mind. Her mother worked long hours as a nurse, and her father, who was often away, didn't make enough to help pay for anything outside of the essentials. Aisha knew that without a scholarship, she would never be able to go to college. Every day, she worked hard, staying up late to complete her homework and trying to get ahead in her studies, but the pressure was building. She wanted to be the first in her family to go to college and make something of herself, But every day the harsh reality of her situation made her wonder if that dream would ever come true. Life for the three friends was a constant balancing act of trying to hold on to their dreams while facing the challenges that came with their circumstances. But there was something about that encounter with Richard Westbrook that stuck with them. They couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, even if they didn't know how or why. They were used to seeing people drive by in expensive cars and living in fancy houses, but to have someone like Richard actually acknowledge them, it felt different. It was a strange feeling, like the universe had nudged them in a new direction, but they couldn't figure out exactly how. One evening, as they walked home from school, Jamal broke the silence. "Do you think he meant it? When he said he'd help us out?" Aisha shrugged. "I don't know. It felt real, but it's hard to believe someone like him would actually care. People like that don't really look back." "Yeah, but he gave us his card," Malik added. "What if he actually does something for us?" They all fell quiet for a moment, each of them lost in their thoughts. It felt too good to be true, but there was that lingering hope deep down that maybe, just maybe, something was about to change. The next few days passed without much happening. The weather cleared up and the rain finally stopped, leaving behind muddy streets and bright blue skies. The kids continued to walk the same route, doing their best to stay optimistic, but the pressures of their daily lives quickly drowned out any thoughts of the rich man in the SUV. Then, one afternoon, as they were heading home from school, they saw a familiar black car parked outside their house. The vehicle wasn't anything fancy, but it looked professional. It was the same car that Richard had driven the day they helped him out of the mud. "Is that him?" Jamal asked, squinting in the direction of the car. Aisha stopped in her tracks. "No way." Malik, ever the curious one, moved closer. "It's him," he said with a grin. "I don't know what he's doing here, but I guess we'll find out." The kids walked up the driveway, their hearts racing. What could this man possibly want? They didn't expect to see him again, let alone in front of their house. As they got closer, Richard stepped out of the car. This time, he wasn't wearing his sunglasses or his expensive suit. He was dressed casually, in a simple shirt and jeans, but his presence was just as commanding as before. He smiled when he saw the kids approaching. "Well, look who it is," he said with a warm smile. "I've been meaning to stop by and thank you properly for helping me the other day. I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time." Jamal looked at the others, his mind racing. No, it's fine. What's going on?" Richard glanced at the house. Behind them, a kind look in his eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about the three of you. What you did for me that day really stuck with me. It's not often I come across people like you, people who are willing to help, no questions asked, without expecting anything in return." Aisha, trying to keep her composure, stepped forward. "We didn't do it for anything, really. It seemed like the right thing to do." Richard nodded. "I get that, and I admire it. But I think people like you deserve more than just a thank you. You deserve a chance to reach your potential. That's why I want to help." The kids stood there, stunned. "Help?" Jamal echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Richard said. "I know things aren't easy for you. I know you have dreams, but sometimes life just gets in the way. I've got the resources, and I'd like to offer you the support to make those dreams come true." The kids exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. This felt like something out of a dream. "I'll explain more later," Richard continued. "But for now, I'd like to make sure you know I'm serious about this. If you're interested, we can work out the details. Consider it my way of paying forward what you did for me." With that, Richard handed Jamal a business card. "Take a look. We'll talk more soon." As Richard got back in his car and drove away, the kids stood there in disbelief. Had this really happened? Was this man really going to help them? They had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain. They had just received an unexpected opportunity to change everything. The next few days felt like a blur to Jamal, Malik, and Aisha. They couldn't stop talking about what had happened. Richard Westbrook's visit was something they never expected, and it was hard to believe that someone like him, with so much money and power, would want to help kids like them. They'd all been through enough tough times to know that people like Richard didn't usually look their way unless they had something to gain. But there was something different about the way Richard had spoken to them. His sincerity, his calmness, and the way he seemed genuinely interested in what they needed. It wasn't like the usual charity offers they'd seen, where people made empty promises. Aisha couldn't stop thinking about it. She had always dreamed of going to college, but it seemed so far out of reach. Her family wasn't wealthy, and every day she saw her mom working long hours, barely making enough to pay the bills. Aisha often found herself worrying about how she would ever get the chance to study, to leave the struggles behind and build a life of her own. Richard had mentioned helping her with college, but it felt like a dream she wasn't ready to believe. Malik was just as unsure. His thoughts were a little different, though. He thought about the chance to dive deeper into technology. He loved computers and spent hours tinkering with them, but he didn't have the equipment or access to the right education to take his interest further. Richard had mentioned helping him with career advice, and Malik's mind raced at the possibilities. Could he really help him become what he wanted to be? Could he actually get the chance to work in tech? Something he'd never had the chance to even think about seriously? Then there was Jamal, who couldn't help but focus on his basketball dreams. He had always been good at basketball, but his neighborhood didn't have the right resources or training to help him develop his skills. He practiced every day, sometimes even in the rain on the cracked court near his home. But he knew it wasn't enough. Professional coaching, travel leagues, and training camps. These were things that the wealthier kids had access to, not him. Richard's offer felt like a miracle. A chance to do something he loved, to maybe even go beyond just playing on local teams. For Jamal, basketball wasn't just a hobby. It was the way out. But even with all the excitement, there was still doubt. Could they really take a step into a new world? Was Richard genuinely trying to help? Or was he just being nice because of the way they'd helped him? They weren't used to people giving anything for free, and the idea that someone would step into their lives to support their dreams seemed impossible to wrap their heads around. Aisha was the first to speak up one evening as they walked home from school. What if he's just being nice? What if he doesn't actually mean it? Malik looked at her, shaking his head. I don't think so. He didn't have to come here. He could have just left us alone after we helped him out of the mud. But he didn't. He said he wants to help us. Maybe this is our chance. Jamal was quiet for a while before finally speaking. I've been thinking about basketball a lot. It's what I've always wanted, but I don't know. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? Aisha put a hand on his shoulder. You are good enough, Jamal. We all have something we're good at. This could be our shot to actually do something with it. The idea of having a chance to follow their dreams felt overwhelming, but it also felt exciting. They had never really had someone who believed in them, not in the way Richard seemed to. For so long, they had been stuck in a cycle of hoping for something better while never seeing any real change. Now things were different. They were being offered a chance to break out of that cycle. A few days later, Richard called. Hey, Jamal, he said, his voice steady and reassuring. I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. No, it's fine, Jamal replied, his heart racing. What's up? I wanted to follow up with you and your friends, Richard continued. I know things are tough, but I want to make sure you know I'm serious about helping. Let's sit down sometime this week and figure out what you need to get started. Jamal couldn't believe it. Richard had really meant it. This wasn't just some polite offer. He was ready to help them make a plan. Jamal quickly glanced at Aisha and Malik, both of whom had been standing close by, listening. That sounds great, Jamal said, feeling his excitement building. When's a good time for you? How about tomorrow afternoon? Richard suggested. We can meet up, talk through everything, and see what works best. Jamal felt a wave of hope. Tomorrow works. Great, Richard replied. I'll see you then. And don't worry, this is just the beginning. We're going to make sure you get the opportunities you deserve. The call ended, and Jamal stood there for a moment, his mind buzzing. Tomorrow. Tomorrow they would meet with Richard, and their lives could change forever. The next day, the three of them were nervous but excited. When Richard arrived at their house in his black car, he was all business. But there was something warm and friendly about him, making them feel more at ease than they expected. They sat down together in the living room where Richard explained his plans to help them. It wasn't just talk. He spoke seriously about what it would take to make their dreams a reality. "You all have potential," Richard said, his eyes moving from one person to the next. "Jamal, I know you love basketball and I can help get you the coaching and the training you need. You'll be able to compete at a higher level, and who knows, maybe even make it to the pros one day." Jamal's heart skipped a beat. "Really?" Richard smiled. "Really, but it's going to take hard work, discipline, and dedication. Are you willing to put in the effort?" "Yeah," Jamal replied without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes." "Good," Richard said, nodding. "Malik, I know you've got a passion for technology and I can get you into some coding programs. We'll connect you with people who can mentor you and help you build the skills you need to make a career out of it." Malik leaned forward, his eyes wide. "You really think I can do that?" "I know you can," Richard said firmly. "It's all about giving you the right tools and support." Aisha's turn came, and Richard turned to her with a kind smile. "Aisha, I know you've got dreams of going to college. I can help you get the scholarships and financial aid you need to make that happen. Your future is waiting for you and I'll help you get there." Aisha felt a lump form in her throat. She had always dreamed of going to college, but now it felt like that dream might actually be possible. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The meeting ended with a plan in place. Richard was going to help them all, and they had the chance to finally follow their dreams. The three kids left the meeting feeling like something big had just happened, like the first step toward a brighter future was finally within their reach. As they walked out of their house together, each of them was lost in their own thoughts. Jamal couldn't help but imagine himself playing on a real basketball team. Malik pictured himself working in a tech company, creating something that could change the world. And Aisha saw herself walking across a stage at graduation, holding her diploma in her hands. For the first time in a long while, they felt like they were in control of their future. All they had to do was believe in themselves, and with Richard's help, anything felt possible. The following weeks felt like a whirlwind for Jamal, Malik, and Aisha. Each of them had embarked on a journey they never thought possible. With Richard's support, everything had changed. They were no longer just kids from a struggling neighborhood. They were on the path to something greater, something beyond their wildest dreams. Jamal's life had been consumed by basketball since he was little. He spent hours practicing on the broken-down court near his house, dreaming of one day playing professionally. But for the longest time, those dreams felt distant and nearly impossible. Now, thanks to Richard's coaching network, Jamal was attending real training camps and even playing in local leagues with proper coaching. The difference was immediate. Jamal's footwork improved, his shooting accuracy got better, and his confidence on the court soared. Richard didn't just give him the opportunity. He also introduced Jamal to people who could take him to the next level. Jamal started traveling to different cities for tournaments, and he saw players who were even better than him. At first, he felt intimidated, but over time he began to realize that he had just as much potential. Every game was a chance to prove himself, and the support from Richard and his coaches kept him motivated. "I can't believe I'm doing this," Jamal said one evening after a practice. He and his friends were sitting on the steps outside their house, talking about the changes that had come with the support they'd received. "You're doing it because you've got the skills," Malik said, tossing a rock into the air. "Now, you've got the chance to show the world what you've got." Jamal nodded, the weight of Malik's words sinking in. He was no longer just practicing on a cracked court with his friends. He was playing on real courts, competing against players who had access to everything he had dreamed of. And soon, he realized he might even have a shot at playing for a professional team. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying, but he had never been more determined. Malik's life had also started to change in ways he couldn't have imagined. He had always loved technology and spent his free time exploring it. but he never knew how to turn it into a career. Richard had connected him with a group of software developers and tech mentors, and soon Malik was attending workshops, learning to code, and working on projects that actually mattered. He had started building his own apps, testing out ideas and gaining hands-on experience in the tech world. His self-doubt began to fade, replaced by a new confidence. Malik couldn't believe how much he had learned in such a short time. With Richard's help, he had been given access to the resources he needed to turn his passion into something real. Malik's dream of working in tech was no longer a distant thought. It was becoming a reality. "Man, I actually made an app today," Malik said one evening, showing Jamal and Aisha the app he had been working on for weeks. It was a simple game, but it was his creation. Aisha's eyes widened. "That's awesome, Malik. I can't believe how far you've come." Malik grinned. "I still have a lot to learn, but this is just the start. Who knows what I could do with more time and the right people behind me." Aisha had her own journey ahead of her. While she had always been the most serious of the three, she had also carried the heaviest burden. She had dreamed of going to college, but the idea seemed impossible. She knew how much it would cost, and her family just didn't have the resources to support her. But Richard had made it possible. With the scholarships and financial aid he helped secure, Aisha had received an acceptance letter to a prestigious college. The moment she opened that letter, she felt like everything had changed. All the sleepless nights spent studying, all the sacrifices her family had made, it was all worth it. Aisha could finally see her future clearly. She was going to college, and she was going to make the most of it. "I never thought this day would come," Aisha said, holding up the acceptance letter one afternoon. "But it's here, I'm going to college." Jamal and Malik cheered, and for a moment they forgot about everything else. Aisha had worked so hard for this, and now it was happening. The future was open to her, and nothing was going to stop her from achieving her dreams. As time went on, the three friends began to see just how much their lives were changing. They were no longer just stuck in their neighborhood, dreaming of something better. They were living it. They were stepping into the world beyond their familiar surroundings, and they were starting to realize their potential. But even as things got better, they never forgot where they came from. Jamal, Malik, and Aisha knew that they were lucky to have met Richard, but they also knew that there were other kids out there who didn't have the same opportunities they had been given. They knew they had a responsibility to give back, to help others who were still struggling the way they had. One afternoon, Richard invited them to a meeting to discuss something important. They met at his office, a sleek building filled with people who were already working to make a difference in the world. Richard welcomed them with a smile. "You've all made incredible progress," Richard said, looking at each of them. "But I want to talk about something bigger. You're not just here to change your own lives, you have the chance to change your community. I want to help you set up a mentorship program for kids who are going through what you went through. You've got the experience, and now you've got the platform to help others." Jamal, Malik, and Aisha looked at each other, the weight of Richard's words sinking in. This was their chance to pay it forward, to use the opportunities they had received to help others who needed it. They agreed without hesitation. "We're in," Aisha said, her voice full of determination. Richard smiled. "I knew you'd say that." And so they began working together to set up the mentorship program. It wasn't easy. There were challenges along the way, and there were moments when they questioned if they were doing the right thing. But with Richard's support and their own growing confidence, they pushed through. They started visiting local schools, talking to younger kids about their experiences, and offering guidance on how to overcome the obstacles they faced. They organized basketball clinics for kids who wanted to learn the game but didn't have the right resources. Malik started teaching coding classes, showing the next generation how they could get into technology, just like he had. Aisha led workshops on college readiness, helping students prepare for the admissions process and showing them that going to college wasn't as far out of reach as they thought. As the months went by, Jamal, Malik, and Aisha realized that their dreams were no longer just about them. They were about their community, their families, and the kids who needed someone to show them that a better life was possible. They had started with a simple act of kindness, helping a man stuck in the mud, and now they were changing lives, one person at a time. And as they stood together at the end of another successful workshop, they knew that they had come full circle. Their lives had transformed, and now they were helping others transform theirs. They had learned the most important lesson of all. Success wasn't just about achieving your own dreams. It was about helping others achieve theirs. As the months went by, Jamal, Malik, and Aisha began to realize how much their lives had truly changed. They were no longer the kids who felt stuck in their small neighborhood, dreaming of a better life from afar. They had stepped into that life, and with Richard's help, they had transformed not only their own futures, but also the futures of many others. The mentorship program they had started was growing, and it was reaching more and more kids every day. The local community had started to take notice of the difference they were making. Jamal, Malik, and Aisha had become role models, not just for younger kids in their neighborhood, but for others in the city who saw what was possible with the right guidance and support. Jamal's basketball journey had taken off. His name had started to spread in local sports circles, and he was getting the attention of scouts who were impressed with his progress. It wasn't just his skills that were getting noticed, it was his attitude, his dedication, and the way he played the game with heart. He had started traveling to even bigger tournaments, and with each game he felt like he was getting closer to his goal. But it wasn't easy. Every day he pushed himself harder, knowing that the dream he had was within his reach. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging game, Jamal sat on the sidelines catching his breath. He wiped the sweat from his brow and looked around at the other players. They were all good, but he knew he was getting better. It was a feeling of growth, of seeing the hard work paying off. "Man, you played well today," one of his teammates said, slapping him on the back. "You're gonna make it." Jamal smiled. "Thanks, but I've got a long way to go. I won't stop until I get there." Back at home, Aisha's excitement about college hadn't faded. Every day she felt more grateful for the opportunity she had been given. She had always believed that education was the key to unlocking a better life, and now she had the chance to prove that to herself and to everyone who had ever doubted her. She had settled into college life quickly, diving into her studies with the same determination she had shown throughout her high school years. But it wasn't just her academics that excited her. It was the people she was meeting, the opportunities she was getting, and the path she was starting to build for her future. College had opened doors for her that she never thought possible. She had joined a law club, where she was learning more about the legal field, and had even started participating in internships that gave her hands-on experience. Every step she took, every new lesson she learned, brought her closer to the dream she had held onto for so long. One evening, as she sat in her dorm room, working on an assignment, she paused for a moment and looked out the window. She thought about everything that had brought her here, the hard work, the sacrifices, and the moments of doubt. But it was all worth it. She was living proof that no matter where you came from, or how difficult your situation, you could make it if you worked hard enough. She smiled to herself, knowing that her journey was just beginning. Malik's journey had been just as transformative. The coding programs he had attended had opened his eyes to a whole new world of possibilities. He had learned so much in such a short amount of time, and it wasn't just about learning to code. It was about learning to think differently, to solve problems in new and creative ways. He had started working on larger projects, and his skills were becoming more refined with every line of code he wrote. Malik had begun to feel confident in his abilities. It wasn't just about the technology anymore. It was about how he could use technology to create something meaningful. One day, Malik sat down at his computer to work on a new project. He had been working on building a website for the mentorship program they had started, and as he typed out the code, a thought occurred to him. He wasn't just learning to code anymore. He was using those skills to make a difference. He had a platform, a way to help others, and that thought filled him with pride. For so long he had been unsure of his future, unsure of where he belonged. Now he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He wanted to use his skills to make an impact, to help others who, like him, might have felt like they had no way out. As Jamal, Malik, and Aisha each moved forward in their personal journeys, they also continued to work together to help their community. The mentorship program had grown beyond anything they had ever imagined. They had expanded it to include more schools, reaching kids who needed guidance, support, and hope. The three friends spoke at schools, sharing their stories and encouraging other kids to pursue their dreams, no matter how difficult the road seemed. One Saturday afternoon, they held a basketball clinic in their neighborhood park. It was a community event and kids from all around the area came to join in. Jamal led the clinic, teaching the younger kids the fundamentals of basketball, while Malik worked on a computer skills workshop nearby. Aisha led a college prep session, teaching kids how to apply for scholarships and what they could do to prepare for higher education. The turnout was huge. Kids of all ages showed up, excited to learn and to be part of something bigger. The three of them worked side by side, teaching, inspiring, and giving back to the community that had once seemed so limiting. They realized that their journey wasn't just about their own success. It was about creating opportunities for others to succeed too. At the end of the clinic, as the sun began to set, the three friends stood together, looking out at the park. The kids they had mentored were smiling, laughing, and playing basketball together. It was a sight they had dreamed of. A community coming together, a community that was changing, and they had been a part of that change. "I never thought we'd get here," Aisha said, her voice filled with pride. "We're not done yet," Malik replied, a grin on his face. "We're just getting started." Jamal nodded. "Yeah, we've got a long way to go, but I know we'll make it. We've come this far together, and we're going to keep pushing." They stood there in silence, for a moment, taking in the scene. It wasn't just the three of them anymore. It was the whole community, the whole neighborhood, and it was growing. They had made a difference, and they were going to keep making a difference. They knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but they also knew they wouldn't have to face it alone. And with that, they made a promise to themselves, not just to make it for their own dreams, but to help others achieve theirs as well. Because they had learned the most important lesson of all. Success wasn't just about what you accomplished for yourself. It was about lifting others up and giving them the same opportunities that had changed their own lives.